It is often the case that the distribution of possible returns from an investment approximates a normal distribution, and therefore the normal distribution is very useful. It means we can completely describe the distribution of possible returns if we know just two things: the mean or expected return and the standard deviation, which is a measure of how far from the mean the possible returns tend to be. A small standard deviation means there is not much variation from the mean, and therefore the risk or variability of returns is low. A large standard deviation means that there tends to be considerably more variation from the mean, representing a higher level of risk. Let's interpret the shape of the normal distribution using values calculated in previous modules. In the module on expected return, we determined that the expected return for the values provided was 5.45%. So this is the return associated with the highest point on the curve. We also determined that the standard deviation is 5.69%. So if we take the mean and subtract the standard deviation, we get a value that is one standard deviation below the mean. If we take the mean and add the standard deviation, we get a value that is one standard deviation above the mean. That gives us a range of values that are within plus or minus one standard deviation of the mean. If we take the mean and subtract 2 times the standard deviation, we get a value that is 2 standard deviations below the mean. And we can also calculate a value that is 2 standard deviations above the mean. We now have a range of values that are within plus or minus 2 standard deviations of the mean. The total area under the curve between plus or minus 2 standard deviations of the mean is the probability that the actual return will be within plus or minus 2 standard deviations. One of the most useful things about the normal distribution is that we can set up confidence intervals, because in a normal distribution about 2/3 of values will fall within plus or minus 1 standard deviation, 95% within plus or minus 2 standard deviations, and over 99% are within plus or minus 3 standard deviations.